You constantly finding yourself stuck in the same patterns, unable to break free from your own limitations? Do you feel like something is holding you back, but you just can't put your finger on it? Today, we're going to uncover a hidden danger that could be getting in the way of your success and happiness, all from within your own mind. So, let's explore this surprising way in which your thoughts can work against you and reveal the key to breaking free from what feels like self sabotage once and for all. Now, in previous lives, you've heard me say this, and I'll say it again. What you think of as self sabotage is probably not at all what you think it is. Maybe we can look at that. We can look at what's going on in your life and how you're responding to it. And we can say, we can make that judgment. You're sabotaging your own success. But that's not very useful. I mean, it's useful to know that you have a problem or something you need to change. That's definitely useful. But assigning that meaning to it, self sabotage, it implies that a part of you is trying to sabotage you. And I've never, ever found that to be the case with myself or with anyone I've ever worked with. Even though sometimes they've come to me with that problem specifically saying, I want to work on my self sabotage. Other people are less aware. They can't seem to succeed at what they want. They don't know why. And they just kind of sit with that, which is very depressing. I've been there more than once. When I ask the question, what do you want? What's the answer to that? What comes up for you? Usually the first answer is the best one to go with. What do you want? Some people tell me I don't know what I want. And then I say, okay, is it safe to say what you want is to know what you want? And I'm not just playing with words. You have to start somewhere. And that somewhere is knowing what you want, even if knowing what you want means you want to know what you want. Now, when I asked that question, did you immediately think of what you don't want? This happens all the time. I ask people, what do you want? And they say, well, I don't want to be broke anymore. I don't want to be in these bad relationships that I keep seeming to find myself in. I don't want to work this job anymore. I don't want to do this profession anymore. Sometimes I've had to work entire sessions with a client, just getting them to state in the positive what they want rather than what they don't want. So it's an obvious problem. If when you think about what you want, really what you think about is what you don't want, you're making it really, really difficult for you to move in the direction of what you want because you don't know what that direction is. As Jason Fladlien would say, fuzzy targets don't get hit. Targets you can't see definitely don't get hit. So if we're so focused on what we're trying to avoid, what we don't want, what do you think you're representing internally? You're representing all the things you don't want. And then your conscious mind comes in and says, okay, avoid this. Don't want this anymore. But your unconscious doesn't use negation. In order to be clear about what you don't want, you first have to know what that is. And so you have to represent it somehow internally, probably visually, maybe visually and auditorily, maybe only auditorily. So your unconscious sees what you're representing, and your unconscious, its job is to move away from confusion and chaos and to move toward clarity. So if you're very clear about what you don't want, what are you doing? You're telling your unconscious to go there. And you can say, "No, no, no, I don't want it. I don't want that though." It's like, yes, your conscious mind steps in and says that, but your unconscious just moves towards the light. I remember listening to Wayne Dyer, who I had the good fortune of being able to see in person give a talk in Los Angeles before he passed away. And he tells this story, and at the time I didn't really understand it. This was years ago. And he said, imagine you, and he didn't make this up, and you might have heard it before. Imagine you see your friend under a street light at night looking for something. And you go to your friend and you say, "Hey, what are you looking for?" And they say, "My keys. I lost my keys." And then you say, "Well, you lost your keys here on the street or on the sidewalk, wherever near the street light?" And they say, "No, I lost them in my home." And they point to their home, and all the lights are turned out in the house. And you say, "Well, why are you looking for your keys down here on the street if you lost them in your home?" And your friend says, "Well, because the light is here." Now, I didn't know what that meant the first time I heard it. It's before I started learning NLP. And then, of course, when I started learning NLP and I was realizing how our internal representations, that's your map of reality. That's how you navigate. You're not going to navigate waters that are scary, that are unknown, that are chaotic and confusing, and that you're not familiar with. Even if those waters are exactly what you're looking for, you're going to stick to what's familiar. And that's what that metaphor means, that we tend to stay where the light is. And that's how we stay small. And that's how we not fulfill our potential. We stay in the light instead of taking the light and start shining it on what it is you want rather than what you don't want. Let's take this a level deeper. When I ask the question, who are you? What comes up? Again, usually the first answers are the right ones because that's you're basing those off the representations that come up first. Who are you? Maybe that's too large of a chunk. That can be a tough one. So let's divide up your life into 3 to 5 major life contexts. This makes it a little easier. So you can think of your career, maybe your marriage, being a parent, a hobby, your social life, your health could be a category or a context. So don't overthink this. Just divide up your life into 3 to 5 major life contexts. And in each one of them, ask yourself, who are you in this context? I'll give you a few moments to do that while I sip my coffee. Now, when you asked yourself who you are, did you think of who you are not? As in, well, at least I'm not like that person, or I'm not the type of person who does this, or I'm not the kind of person who is like that, or whatever. This happens a lot. I have asked many people this question. Yes, that's a Louisiana Bayou mug. That's where I'm from. I didn't know I was advertising here. Okay. My mother gave it to me. She wants to remind me of where I'm from. So, did any representations come up for you, or did any answers come up for you where you were saying or defining yourself by what you are not? A lot of people do this. Why is this important? It's really important to know how you're defining yourself. It's really important to know how you define what it is that you want. Why? Have you ever heard of something called projection? Projection comes from negated representations. So the representations are there, and then you negate them. What do you think happens when you do that? You've heard people use this term, I'm sure. That's projection. It becomes a blind spot. So let's give this a try. Whether you believe it or not, say the words to yourself, I am kind, and see what comes up for you. What do you think about when you say, I am kind? Typically, what happens, it's not going to be 100% of all of you because there's some variations to this, but when you say something like that, your unconscious wants to support it with examples so that you actually know what you're saying. So if I say, I am kind, typically what I think about are times when I was kind. Yeah, I see movies of times when I did kind things. Even if I might still go, I'm not sure I'm fully a kind person, but if I say that I am kind, I get those representations, those examples that supports this. It is possible that you got negated examples, but we'll get to that in a second. Now say to yourself, I am not cruel. Okay, John, if it's just words, then put some meaning into this. What would it mean for you to be kind? So make some attachment here so that you know. I mean, yes, you can just sit there and say words in your head, but that's not going to be useful. You could say, ask yourself, what does it mean for you to be kind? Maybe that's a better way to ask the question. And then try, I am not cruel. Hopefully, most of you are not cruel, and you believe that you're not cruel. But notice what comes up. What representations come up when you say, I am not cruel? How do you support a statement like that? How does your unconscious support a statement like that? So set aside the I am kind for now. Ask yourself or say to yourself, I am not cruel. Or what would it be like to not be cruel? That was an interesting answer. So most of the time when people say this, they don't see images of themselves being cruel. They usually see images of other people being cruel or cruelty. And then they have a way of negating that. Their conscious mind comes in and says, that's not me. That's not who I am. But notice how that feels different than when you say, I am kind, and you have representations of you being kind. The difference between representations of you being kind versus representations of other people being cruel. Which one feels better? Which one is more how you want to go about doing this in your life? It's entirely possible that you see people being cruel in your internal representations. And you say, not only am I not that, but I'm better than those people. And maybe that gives you a little boost in your self worth or self esteem. And that's not healthy at all. It's not healthy. So what you probably if you follow this, what you probably find is that focusing on representations of you doing and being something you value, like being kind, is a lot better than making representations of cruelty and then trying to separate yourself from that by saying, I am not that. What if you've completely defined yourself by what you are not? Instead of saying, I'm kind, I'm generous, I'm happy, I'm successful, I'm loving and lovable, I'm at peace. These are all stated in the positive. What if I said, what if I flip this into stating everything in the negative based on what I am not, negating all of these things? So if I said, well, I'm not unhappy, I'm not a failure, I'm not depressed, I'm not cold and indifferent. What if you were to define yourself by negation in every aspect of who you are? What do you think would happen? Yeah, it's only avoidance and paranoia. Have you ever met someone who was paranoid? And I don't mean that necessarily in the clinical sense, but somebody who thinks the world is out to get them, who believes in every conspiracy theory they hear. And to listen to them talk, you can hear it. It's always about who they are not and what they're trying to avoid and how the world is out to get them and people are out to get them. Everybody's a suspect. Can't trust anybody. So, what are they projecting? They're projecting all of their fear and paranoia onto the world around them. What we negate internally tends to be what we project onto the world around us. And this creates incredible blind spots because how can you move in the direction of where you want to take your life? And how can you do the things that are going to fulfill you if you're always so focused on negating what you are not and negating what you're trying to avoid and negating the kinds of behavior that you don't want to do and negating becoming the kind of person you don't want to be. Another thing that you will do is you'll blame other people and other things for everything. You tend to not take as much responsibility for yourself and blame a lot of other people for pretty much everything because everything's negated. And you see this in narcissists. Narcissists take this to the extreme. They won't ever accept responsibility or accountability when anything goes wrong, but they'll take credit for everything, especially things they had nothing to do with. They negate the shame that they feel, and that's really the basis of narcissism is shame. So you want to notice if you have a fixed negative way of thinking about anyone or of anything and ask yourself if you're projecting something you're negating in yourself. It's not an easy thing to do. We have very strong beliefs about how we think people should be and how the world should be. And we have all of our justifications and all of our reasons. So it's not the easiest thing to turn it back on yourself and say, all right, if I am this judgmental of something, if I separate myself from the world or this piece of the world or these type of people so much, am I negating something in myself that is causing me to project that onto them? It's not 100% of the time, I wouldn't say, but I would say it usually is something there. And what we're really doing is the more we separate ourselves from the world, we're really separating ourselves from ourselves. And this just slows you down to put it mildly. And depending on how much you engage in this, it can it can be the reason why you're stuck and you're not moving forward in your life. I talked about this earlier. When it came to making money, I was stuck because I was afraid it was going to make me a greedy person. So what type of representations do you think I was making in my mind when it came to making money? Wasn't focused on what good it could bring into my life and into other people's lives as much as I was focused on, well, I don't want to become like those greedy people. I could simply just trust myself that I'm not going to become greedy. And I can say, I could focus on creating representations of me making money and doing the things that I wanted to do with that money and adding in generosity. Problem solved. But I wasn't aware of this. I wasn't aware of what I'm sharing with you now. So you can now be aware of this. And it's a great way to smoke out limiting beliefs, to take your strong feelings of negation, of separation from you and other people and from you and parts of the world. When I say parts of the world, I mean in your everyday life, things that you try to avoid or that you judge harshly, and ask yourself, what am I negating anything inside myself that is causing me to project that? And if that is so, what do I want instead? Instead of focusing on what I don't want, what do I want instead? And it makes things so much easier. And you start to reconnect with yourself, reconnect with the world, reconnect with other people. And even if there's someone or something that feels like it's rather dangerous, and I don't mean dangerous like it's actually threatening your physical health, though even still, remaining connected within yourself makes you more resourceful. And even staying connected to what might seem like a destructive force is safer than trying to pull away from it. And a good example I can give of this is I do Brazilian Jiu Jitsu. And it's basically grappling and wrestling. You want to have your hand you want to be touching that other person so that you know when they're about to move. They can telegraph that. But if you're constantly trying to pull away, you can't know that. You have to stay connected to that person to have a better sense of where they're going next so that you can counter it. And you'll find this in most martial arts, especially Eastern martial arts, this idea of staying connected rather than separating yourself. And Bruce Lee used to talk about this, where you stay connected to the person you're fighting almost like you're dancing. You see two people dancing and they're really in sync with each other. It's almost like they know what each other's going to do before they do it. Well, if you're in a scenario where there's a fight, by staying connected, it's when the other person slips out of that connection that they get hit. A great remedy for this is acceptance, not self-acceptance, not to the exclusion of self-acceptance, I should say, but all acceptance, acceptance of self, acceptance of other people, acceptance of the world around you, which then allows you to accept when there might be a problem, because then you can solve it. But if you don't accept it, can't solve it. The other remedy is to break the habit of defining yourself by what you are not and focus on defining yourself by who you are, by who you want to become. When you think about that, isn't that at least much more pleasant to define yourself by who you want to become rather than who you're afraid you might become? Fear is very strong. It's a very powerful emotion, which often does create a focus. Fear can be a focus on the things that you're afraid of, which then freaks you out even more. But not only that, it just makes you more clear about the very thing that you want to avoid, which, like I said before, your unconscious draws you there. Your unconscious will draw you to the clarity. And I'm sure all of us have experienced, I know I have many times, of my worst fears coming true. And I think to myself, That's exactly what I was trying to avoid, and that's exactly what happened," or "That's the one mistake I didn't want to make, and that's the one mistake that I made. How does that happen?" Well, you probably gave your unconscious a lot of information about how to do exactly that one thing that you did not wanna do, instead of focusing on giving your unconscious the information of doing what you want to do. It's like when people have, say, like a public presentation they have to give, and this scares a lot of people, giving public presentations or public talks. And then they tell themselves over and over again, don't screw up, don't screw up, don't screw up. What do you have to access in your mind in order to know what not to screw up? You have to access you screwing up and doing the very thing that you don't want to do. And because you're thinking about it as something that's coming up in the future, you're actually mentally future pacing you screwing up. And then you get into that situation and then you screw up and you go, well, you know, what happened here? Self sabotage. There must be a part of me trying to sabotage me. And it's like, no, you just don't realize what you're doing. What you're doing is feeding your unconscious the wrong information. And it's usually based in fear. So if you let go of the fear, and it's perfectly okay to know what you don't want and to know what you don't want to do, that's fine. You don't want to ignore that. But you want to give your unconscious the information of, okay, so what do I want to do in that situation? If I'm giving a public presentation, how do I want to act and see myself? Okay, I'm calm, I'm delivering this presentation the way that I want to deliver it. I see myself doing it the way that I want to do it. You're giving yourself reference experience, even though it hasn't happened yet. You're giving yourself references of how to do what it is that you want to do. So when you step into that situation, your mind goes, okay, what's familiar here? What do we already have to base this on, this situation? You gave that information to your unconscious, that's what it's going to work with. And you end up giving the presentation that you want to give, or you end up acting this out, playing this out, doing the things that you want to do. But if you give the negative of what you want and you show your unconscious that and you feed it a lot of that information of you screwing up and you don't give it any positive information of what you do want to do, what does your mind have to go on when you're in that situation? It only has the negative. That's the only reference it has. So that's what it's going to go with. Another example of this is if you're a parent, you know what I mean when I say this, that we become our parents oftentimes when we parent, even though we told ourselves that we didn't want to do that. I think when I was having kids, I thought, yeah, I don't want to do what my parents did. Not that they were terrible. But I was like, I had a bunch of other ideas of how I wanted to do better. But I didn't spend time working on myself with this. So when I was in those situations with my kids, especially very early on, you feel like you're just trying to catch your breath because, well, I had two kids in 1 year. So it was almost like having twins. And I found myself acting out in ways just like my parents. And I thought, what the hell? That's true. They say you become your parents. And here I am doing this. Well, what was happening is up until this point, I had no reference for parenting except for my parents. And even though I was on the other side of it, that was still the closest reference that I had. So I acted out what I had as references inside of me because my mind had no other references to go on. And your mind is always looking for the familiar, it's always looking for that clarity, even if the familiar and the clarity is something you don't want. It will take you there. It will take you wherever you shine the light. And this is why it's important to create successful environments for yourself. You heard the saying, I'm sure, that you're the sum total of the 5 people you spend the most time with. I don't think that's 100% true, but pretty close. The information you surround yourself with, you're going to respond to. So if there are people around you who are doing things and they're succeeding, you're surrounding yourself with good, successful information, people who are doing the things that you want to do, or at least they're successful in the way that you want to be successful. That's You're nurturing yourself with that information. You put yourself around people who are trying to hold you back because if you succeed better than them, or they're not succeeding at all, and you start succeeding and living the life that you want to live, that's going to make them feel bad. So they might be trying to hold you back and saying passive aggressive things or underhanded compliments or putting information in your head that makes you feel like you can't do it or you're not good enough. Even if you don't believe it, even if you don't go along with it, you still have to fight it. So put yourself around the people you want to become more like. Surround yourself at home with good information or successful information, uplifting things that you want. But what's really the place you need to focus on more than any other is what's going on inside, your internal representations, because that's the only true home you will ever know. And if your internal representations support who you want to be rather than negate who you don't want to be, you can be in some really lousy situations and you will be fine. You can be around a bunch of passive aggressive people who are trying to hold you back, but you're secure inside because you're surrounding yourself by the most powerful information, your own representations, and you are consciously creating those representations to support you in who you want to be, who you want to become, and the life you want to create. This is why NLP is so powerful, because it teaches you to do exactly that. You're not functioning directly off of objective reality. You are functioning from the representations inside, your map of reality. And that map was created rather haphazardly as you were growing up. That's why most people are not fulfilling their potential. And even the people who are even at the top of their game often could still have a lot more room to grow. It's amazing to me, some of the people who have come to me for coaching, people I thought could probably coach me on a few things. And the reason why is that even though they're extremely successful, they know they could do more and be more. And it's not about the money. It's about knowing that there's potential, that they have greater potential. And that's what's important to them. The great thing about fulfilling your potential as well is it's very fulfilling. And it also tends to benefit those around you. Acceptance of self, acceptance of others and of the world, especially what you can't change, is a huge step forward to reversing projection. We don't have to focus on the horrors that occur in the world in order to avoid them, nor do we need to invest our attention on the bad behavior of others in order to make sure we don't become like them. We also don't want to ignore these things either. This is what true acceptance is. To move forward in life, accept your imperfections as well as the imperfections of others. Know that the world is not out to get you. The universe is not conspiring to make you fail. What you decorate your mind with becomes your reality. So fill your mind with representations of the life you want to live and the person you want to become. And you can start doing this now. Plant the seeds of your own success and nurture them daily and grow them into the potential that is calling you. All right. Let me know what your big takeaway from this is. Even better if you post it here in the comment section. It'll help you solidify it in your mind, and also sharing is caring. All right. So, Steven, you're from New Orleans, huh? Should have known. Yeah, I'm actually from Morgan City, if you know where that is. And I went to college in New Orleans and I think I lived there for 6 or 7 years. Good morning. Gratitude, freedom, joy, and passion to you. Well, thank you, Blackjack. Same to you. Imagine images of wanting to be cruel. Okay, so see people commenting on the questions I was asking. With rebelliousness defines itself as the opposite of something, and so is not completely free to be its own thing. Yeah, conformity is, non-conformity is really just inverse conformity. It's not. People like to pride themselves on being nonconformists, but you're still chained to conformity. You're just the inverse of it. Being kind and helpful lead me to people pleasing. Well, it doesn't have to. You can be kind because it's fulfilling for you to be kind, and doesn't have to be about people pleasing. Doesn't also create a kind of overcompensation like the kid of dictatorial parents who goes on to be too permissive. I need a little more context on that statement. So thank you, Damon. This explains the structural support to ongoing comparisons with other people. I've had that as a major question for a long time. Yes, don't compare yourself to other people. Even when so if you're around, like I said, you're surrounding yourself around successful people you want to be like. If you compare your work and and your notes, so to speak, that's usually a very positive thing. Mr. Beast, one of the biggest YouTubers, was talking about how early on he created a group of people who were all doing YouTube and trying to figure it out. And so instead of every person being in their own isolated bubble, uh, trying to solve the problems of getting their videos viewed and their subscribers going up, if you worked with 10 people and they're all 10 are solving the same problems, and then you're sharing those solutions with all 10 of them, well, you're helping each other become more and more successful. Now, the moment you start comparing yourself to other people as far as your self-worth, which is imaginary, it's not real, then you start creating real problems for yourself. But you can do some comparisons as far as like comparing the work that you're doing. And if that person's trying this and it's working for them, then I can go and do that as well. That's a form of comparison, but it's a healthy form of comparison. It's just like competition. Competition can be healthy, and it can drive you and your competitor to uh, achieve things you never would have if you weren't competing. But if it becomes something ugly and where you're trying to hurt each other and trying to pull each other down, then that's not healthy at all. Focus on who you want to become and not who you are. Well, it's fine to focus on who you are right now, or to, acknowledge that. Probably re-imprinting with parents, giving the model of them in your brain meets resources, updates your model to include new options. Probably helps having those options available unconsciously. Definitely. I'm loving NLP more and more as I learn. I'm going through some life changes at the moment, and your videos are helping me get through them. Thank you. Oh, you're welcome. Good. Paranoia, the state of believing that the universe is conspiring to help you. Oh, that's pronoia. Well, yeah. I know I've heard people talk about that, or like, think about the world conspiring to help you. And I guess I'm a little more of a realist a lot of times. And if that works for you, then it works for you. I'm not going to argue with that. Started the video at it will take you wherever you shine the light. That was some crazy coincidence. Interesting. You focus on what you don't want, you'll get more of the same. Yes. Big takeaway. Instead of moving away from what you don't want, accept reality and connect with what you do want and focus on that. Yes. Can you compare yourself to how you were a week ago? Be careful with that. I think it's good to know when you're making progress. Just be careful. Anytime you use comparison and it has an effect on like your sense of self, your self-worth or anything like that, even if it's in the positive, something's not right. Self-worth is not real. You need to pull the plug on that. So if you're feeding this idea of self-worth by trying to boost it, you're just creating more of the problem. And the moment you run into someone or something, um, or like let's say, you're comparing yourself to yourself. And let's say you're not doing as well now than you were before. And that gives you a lower sense of self-worth. Then when it gets better, then you go, "Oh, I have a higher sense of self-worth." You're locked into that game, and it's never going to help you. So you can look at it as information, as data for you to sort of self-correct and say, "Okay, what do I need to do now to change this?" And that's a good thing. But as soon as it starts getting into that, "Oh, am I good enough or am I not good enough or I'm less than now than I was before," none of that's going to help you. So, okay to compare yourself to yourself from previous times as long as you don't engage in self-worth type thinking. The challenge is to not use negations because we all use them at least to prevent people from concluding something we have said to be something else than we would like people to understand. Well, negations are necessary in our language. You just have to be careful how you apply negations to yourself. My friends like video and turn on notification bell. I subscribe to this channel since last year and haven't seen it till just now. Again, saying I'm shocked is an understatement. Oh, okay. I hope you're shocked in a good way. Yeah, I was not producing as much last year, but I was putting a lot more effort into each individual video that didn't pay off so well. I still struggle between spending my time on building what I want in my life versus spending time to take care of others. My parents and culture praise those sacrificing themselves for others. Yeah, be careful with that. I mean, there's definitely something noble to putting sometimes putting other people's interest ahead of yours in the sense of like, I definitely feel that way about my kids and, with my wife, but it all has to balance. It has to balance. If you're excluding yourself from this equation and you're not getting your needs met, you're not good for yourself and you're not good for everyone else either. So keep that in mind. Love the metaphor that how you decorate your mind, your reality will be like that, and that you don't want to fight in your own place where you live. You said that earlier. I just love this. So true and puts you in your own power as you are the owner. Thank you. Yeah, well, what you decorate your mind with, not only will your reality be like that, that is your reality. Your internal representations are your reality, and that is projection. That is, we are always projecting our internal representations onto the world around us. We're projecting our map of reality onto actual reality all the time. So, what kind of reality do you want to project? One of disconnection, of avoidance, of trying to move away from what you're not, or do you want to create a map of reality with that's accurate, that's rich with resources and rich with choice, and project that onto the world around you? That's what NLP is really about. Always focus on what you want, not what you don't want, so you can get what you want. Yes, absolutely. How do you remain conscious when dealing with passive aggressive narcissistic people who are in authority over you and you have to deal with them? I've made a few videos on this. I'm not going to rehash all of that. It depends on the kind of narcissist you're dealing with, and especially if they have authority over you, you have to be careful. Uh, I like calling narcissists out unless they're violent narcissists. Then you just want to, first of all, you just want to try to avoid narcissists altogether. If you can't, and they're not violent narcissists, I like to call them out. They don't like the feedback, and I stick to what's true. I don't, I'm not just going to make stuff up. But if I give them feedback they don't want to hear, they tend to just get away from you. Would be a love would be a love challenge to say just what we feel and want. What a relief that would be. Oh, what we feel and want. Yeah, good. I was joking about pronoia. Thank you, Damon, for the valuable information. You're welcome. Focus and clarity are difficult obstacles to overcome with ADHD. Well, they're happening. It's happening anyway. So I get what you're saying. The ADHD could make it difficult for you to sort of consciously realize what's happening inside and then make changes to it. I understand that. But just know that this is happening anyway. ADHD is not preventing you from creating internal representations. You're doing it. And you've created a map of reality within you. And the ADHD just might make it difficult for you to explore that map and modify it. And it's okay though. I mean, you can do this. I know many people who have ADHD who have done it. Be a lovely exercise to only say what we've okay, we already did that. You rewrote it to okay. Thank you, Damon. A gentle reminder to check my fears and what I'm projecting. Nice. Great topic. Thanks, Damon. You're welcome. You're welcome. You're welcome. You're clarifying the room. Yeah, you're welcome. Grateful for this information. Okay. Grateful for all of you as well. Thank you so much again for showing up, hanging out. Love sharing this. I love the community that we're cultivating here. It's I look forward to this every day. And I'm looking forward to doing it again with you tomorrow. And for all of you who are not here live and you watched this on the replay, I appreciate you as well and grateful that you're still getting this information even though you're not showing up live. I totally get that. Not everybody can. Take care, everyone, and I will see you tomorrow.